Hello everyone, I'm Dr.LLM.Christian Barrientos Ichaso. I'm international business lawyer, anti-corruption, anti-crime. We talk international security now with this podcast with Martin Arostegui. Thank you for subscribing our YouTube channel and sharing everything about international law, security, compliance, anti-corruption, anti-crime, and business. We talk with Martin Arostegui. He's a renowned and highly experienced journalist, specializing in military and intelligence matters, who has covered the kind of international conflicts. We are now senior deployed in Ukraine. He has worked for Voice of America, Wall Street Journal, the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, CNN, Fox News, United Press International, and France 24. And he is the author of the book about the military special operation called Twilight Warriors. Thank you for subscribing and continue with Martin Arostegui. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Christian. Glad to be on board. Good to see you. Well, since we last spoke, things have developed in Ukraine. Some would say perhaps for the better. This military stalemate, which I've spoken about in the past, in our past podcasts, in which Russia seems incapable of achieving its main goal. And while Ukraine is also hurting, obviously, very badly from being attacked, invaded, and bombed in a very persistent manner by one of the biggest military powers in the world. The stalemate has gotten to the point in which I think both sides are being forced to negotiate. This gotten to the point when I think negotiations are very seriously being pursued, and a possible personal meeting between Putin and the Ukrainian President Zelensky is being seriously, at this point, considered as a serious possibility in possibly the next week or so, the next few days. Just to update what is happening on the battlefield, Russia has made some gains over the past week. It has virtually managed to take over the southern city of Mariupol. It's destroyed it. It's flattened it after 3 weeks of constant bombardment, in which it has deliberately targeted civilian population. It has managed to more or less, I think, bring it under, or at least bring part of it under its control. Bear in mind, this is where the Ukrainian Azov battalion fighting, and this is a highly indoctrinated, highly committed Ukrainian nationalist unit. It's supposedly it's been accused of harboring neo-Nazis. It's a highly fanatical fighting force, trained and which has been trained in very sophisticated special operations techniques by the CIA. It's and it has managed to hang on there under very difficult conditions, fighting ferociously in a very motivated way for 2 weeks under constant Russian bombardment and attack. So the Russians seem to finally be able to deal with the situation that they have Mariupol completely cut off. At one point, they're even cutting off the humanitarian corridor that had been negotiated there. So they seem to be moving in a decisive way to take Mariupol. This is very important for the Russians because this allows them to connect. This is the corridor connect. This would enable a corridor connecting Crimea and the Donbass region, which are territories Russia already controls. So this would give them effective control of eastern Ukraine, which is what they are going to demand in any negotiation with Zelensky. If Zelensky cede them eastern Ukraine, and so now they're control of it. They can claim it. They can make a realistic claim to to that, which is going to be one of the main negotiating issues, one of the main issues in the negotiation. So they have what the Russians have not been able to do, however, is take the main cities of Kiev, the capital, and Odessa. They are no nearer accomplishing that than they were a week ago. In fact, if anything, they might have been pushed back a bit from Kiev, and the amphibious landing that was perceived for Odessa looks like it's not going to happen. There were reports that some of the Marines that were supposed to land there had mutinied and didn't want to do it. And the ships that they have surrounding Odessa have now been moved elsewhere. Frankly, Christian, I think that there's I think, Christian, that there's a very strong reason. There's another, aside from the military problems. There's a strong reason why Russia, from the inability of their ground forces to move in on Odessa and Kiev. There is a very fundamental problem here as to why Russia can't take those places and why they cannot resort to massive carpet bombing like they've done in Mariupol to just flatten the places and just pound any resistance into submission. Both Kiev and Odessa, which are the two main cities of Ukraine, are the main junction points. They are the main transmission points for the pipelines carrying gas from Russia to Europe. So to engage in indiscriminate, massive carpet bombing of either city, aside from the massive cost in human terms, would run the risk of damaging or cutting the pipeline. And of course, for Russia, this is like cutting its own throat. If the gas was cut off to Europe, then Europe would proceed to cut off Russia entirely. And of course, Russia's main source of revenue, what it's using to pay for its military, would be cut off. They would be cutting off their own source of revenue. It would be suicidal. So this is something that Russia cannot do. And it's the reason that they cannot carpet bomb or bomb Odessa and Kiev into submission, which are cities that they're also incapable of taking with ground forces or very, very targeted surgical type with limited air support, which is how they would have to do it. And they don't have the force to do it. As we discussed before, the Russian army is not in good shape. Morale is very low. They have apparently they developed a serious logistical problems, being augmented by the Ukrainian resistance, which is very effectively attacking and harassing the supply lines, which are along these long highways, which are where trucks and tanks and fuel trucks can easily be picked off very, very easily. So that's the reason that Russia can't take these cities. And that's the reason that ultimately they have to negotiate something. The Ukrainians themselves are hurting. Don't get me wrong. It's not only the Russians that are having problems. Russia seems to have managed over the past week somewhat more careful targeting of. They seem to have upgraded their intelligence and are managing to more targeted attacks on Ukraine's main supply depots, training bases, on the rear guard, basically. They managed to, I think they used hypersonic missiles, it's now being reported, to take out a very large training facility in Western Ukraine. Killing, I may add, about, it's estimated, according to the British press, 3 British, we presume, training personnel. Probably, I don't think they're foreign mercenaries. I think they were actually perhaps members of the Special Air Service Regiment or MI6 contractors that were working to train and organize the Ukrainian special forces. This was a very important base for the Ukrainians, and it's been largely destroyed in the past day or so by Russian missile attacks. They've also hit one of the main underground depots for Ukrainian arms depots also in Western Ukraine. So they're managing to get their act together a little bit on their targeting of the actual Ukrainian, vital Ukrainian military targets. They're just randomly random attacks we've had against civilian apartment buildings and those civilian targets that's in the military value at all. Just to intimidate the population as a whole, to try to pressure them, to create pressure to give them to Russian demand. So both sides are hurting. The Russians can't really go any further than they've gone, and the Ukrainians are starting to be hit in their jugular. So I think it's my guess is, my opinion is that they probably will sit down and negotiate seriously at some point soon.
Interesting your opinion. Interesting because that's a long time to fight the Russian troops in the Ukraine. He lost. Russia is lost the war, is lost the time, and need to negotiation with this moment for claims a Russian petition. Good opinion. I think so. You know, in the case the radar bases in Central America and Nicaragua. Why is real this position Russia and Latin America interesting and do the bases, military bases in Nicaragua?
Yeah, well, obviously, I think I've touched on that subject before. Let me go back. Well, let me start out by another apparent development. As you know, the Biden administration has, in order to get more oil, to make up for the oil shortage being caused by its freezing of its cutoff of Russian purchases of Russian oil, it has tried to fast track negotiations with Iran to drop sanctions and over its nuclear program, and also it is setting up negotiation or has made an appeal to Venezuela to drop sanctions on the Maduro regime in order to acquire some oil from Venezuela. Let me tell you, while the Iran deal seems to be moving ahead, there seems to be something happening in Venezuela that is not moving ahead. And the reason for that could well be Russian pressure on Maduro. The Russians, they have radars in Venezuela. They control Venezuela, their defense system. The Wagner Group, I believe, probably the Russian special operations mercenary team, probably manages Maduro's personal security. And they're doing basically the same thing in Nicaragua, which is what you're bringing up now. Basically, Russia now manages a triangle of allies, military allies in the South American Caribbean region: Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. Not much has been known about what they've done in Nicaragua, and they have radar bases there. They've established a radar, and I think what is most is located near the military base. Well, the base of the main infantry, the Nicaraguan infantry brigade. And what I think is even more important, they have a satellite. They also have a satellite communications base in Nicaragua. A satellite link up facility station in Nicaragua. Supposedly, this is managed by Russia's anti-drug agency. Okay, supposedly Russia runs the facility as part of their anti-drug program, which they've offered to run for Nicaragua. Frankly, I think what they're doing is keeping track of drug flights and all that, so they can possibly use that as leverage to gain control of and gain leverage on the drug cartels. That's what I think. That's what I think they're doing it. I don't think they're passing any of that information on to the DEA or to the United States. So it's interesting. Why is Russia so interested in tracking drug activity in Central America? Obviously, they can develop leverage on the drug cartels to maybe conduct operations through
No
them
reason. Don't have reason.
in the area or against the United States. So that's interesting. I mean, they've given Nicaragua lots of other type of military aid. I mean, there's still Nicaragua. They've got Nicaragua's 50 T-72 tanks. 50 T-72 tanks. That makes them the most powerful tank force in all of Central America. I don't think any other Central American country even has tanks. Okay? Russia's given or so Nicaragua with Russian money for missile patrol boats, fast patrol boats, and missile launching patrol boats. Again, I think this gives Nicaragua the most powerful navy in Central America, with which they can possibly threaten the Colombian islands of San Andres Islands, on which Nicaragua has had long-standing territorial claims. So, yeah, I think definitely Nicaragua is like Venezuela, similar to Venezuela. So Nicaragua is building up its military hardware, with Russian hardware to give Russia through which Russia gets further control over the region. Keep in mind, I mean, Nicaragua has often had long-standing territorial claims on the Costa Rica. It's had, it can move. It's very involved, as you know, back in the 80s in supplying guerrillas in El Salvador. And so it's had a tradition. The last time it was under Soviet Russian domination or Russian influence. So yeah, I mean, I think this is there's a relationship that has existed for a very long time between Russia and the Sandinistas. And perhaps Russia could maybe supply or support some Nicaraguan military venture against its neighbors in the near future.
It's possible they protect the criminal organization. Nicaragua is a dictator state. We are criminal, lottery money, drugs, traffic, and support the rule map for Mexico and the security of border in the United States. That's terrible. That's terrible, the rule map of the drugs and crime.
Yeah, no, Nicaragua could become a base to launch all sorts of operations against them. They could send they could infiltrate terrorists or maybe commando teams through the immigrants. A lot of Russian immigrants apparently now being reported to be coming through the Mexican border. That's the latest report of what is happening along the Mexican border. A lot of Russians are coming across. A lot of them may well be, probably most of them are legitimate refugees, but it's very easy to infiltrate that also because Russian spetsnaz or undercover commando teams of terrorists to conduct operations outside the United States. Nicaragua could well be a launching pad, that kind of thing.
And Honduras, the ex-president of Honduras is processing for traffic drugs now.
That's the ex-president.
Yeah,
is being prosecuted.
Yeah, Fernandez, ex-president Fernandez is in the case of drug traffic. He
I think drug traffickers are
drug traffic
or control that entire area. I mean, and in fact, it's interesting the Russian connection there. El Salvador. Which has now been until recently was a pretty solid U.S. ally. In the UN vote to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, they abstained, which leads one to believe that they're also meeting with Russia or setting up some sort of cooperation with the Putin regime.
The cartel, Sinaloa cartel, by the president Honduras, Orlando Hernandez y Porfirio Lobo Sosa is accusing the United States about the bravery of cartel Sinaloa in Mexico. These two ex-presidents. Okay, I shared this news. Okay. The cartel of Sinaloa. With the cartel of Sinaloa, back the president in Honduras.
Two former presidents of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernández and Porfirio Lobo Sosa, are accused in the United States for having received bribes from the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. At least two former presidents could have a similar position. Yeah, I mean, the indictments are growing, Christian. You know, we talked the other day of how the ex-head of serving head of the Bolivian anti-narcotics force had been indicted for drug trafficking. And this is just spreading all over Latin America. Again, I mean, I think we're making progress. It's difficult to say if these indictments mean that there's a crackdown that is actually working, there is a crackdown happening which is actually going to limit drug traffic, or is it becoming so widespread that it's indicative that governments are up to drug trafficking up to their necks? I mean, some governments did this quite blatantly. I mean, in Venezuela, as you know, the two former interior ministers were indicted truck traffickers at the time that they were appointed. At the time they were appointed to the cabinet. So it seems to be definitely a spreading phenomenon.
Oh,
the scope of these drug trafficking networks is growing. I mean, we talked about the other day of the biggest drug trafficking network, which has so far been busted, being intercepted, which is smuggling records amounts of a lot of it Bolivian cocaine into Europe. That suddenly it had turned up, its money laundering center was now Dubai. And it's the first time that I heard that. It's the first time that a drug trafficking. So, in fact, Dubai is something of an interesting, happening place these days. I mean, there's a lot of, as we say, this massive drug trafficking network just was uncovered there, and part of this investigation on the massive shipment of cocaine to Europe, and also apparently a lot of Russian oligarchs are landing there. I think it was an exodus of Russian oligarchs in private jets to Dubai last week, where they're trading in their cryptocurrencies and their gold and other assets in dollars. And Assad, the president of Syria, Hafez al-Assad, who was of course an important ally, a client of the Russians, was in Dubai last week as well. Trying to get business deals for his, trying to set up financing deals for his government. So yeah, Dubai is getting to be an interesting place. Another point, Christian, which I would say is something that I've been working on, or something that I've been very concerned about, is it's interesting, you know, Putin in his speech he gave in Moscow last week, promoting or justifying his move to Ukraine, or appealing for support, public support for his war in Ukraine, mentioned a fifth column. You know, the people opposing the war were a fifth column in Russia working for the West. You know, Russia has had a fifth column operating for its interests in the West for a very long time. I mean, I've for a very long time, I've suspected that a lot of these environmentalist groups, which have gained incredible influence and leverage on Western governments in Europe and the United States. I mean, they've designed radical green policies which have virtually paralyzed the fossil fuels, oil and gas industry in Europe and the United States, to the detriment of American and European interests, and much to the benefit of Russia and also China. According to the ex-head of NATO, said last week that he had information, or they had long had managed information to be effective, that a lot of these groups are being actively supported and financed by Russia. That Russia is financing and supporting the green movement in these countries, which are generating policies that eliminate the production of gas and oil in the United States and Europe, making them more dependent on Russian gas and oil, which is exactly the weapon that Russia is now using against the West in this war with Ukraine. It is the leverage that Russia has on the West. So this is a very, very interesting development. I mean, I have suspected it all along. I mean, there have been suspicions voiced, there have been reports about this, but it's interesting that this came from a former head of NATO, and I believe that it's also referenced, these accusations are also referenced to in emails intercepted emails of Hillary Clinton when she was U.S. Secretary of State that were intercepted or revealed in WikiLeaks. So now we have it clear. You know, this has been Russia's secret weapon in the West, and it is now this week it has been revealed.
Democratic connections. Yeah, I remember the WikiLeaks report with Hillary Clinton emails. Scandal, tremendous scandal in the war.
Yeah, and one of the things but a lot of the emails are true. I mean, one of the things she says in those emails, and it's funny coming from Hillary Clinton, who belongs to the whole, the whole Green New Deal crowd. I mean, all the guys pushing this are all friends of Hillary Clinton, and she says in her email that she suspects that some of these extremist environmentalist movements, possibly connected to this crazy Norwegian girl, Greta von Thunberg and all that, are Russian-financed operations. They are Russian fronts, deliberately set up, designed to weaken Western energy production to make the West more dependent on Russia.
The Europe depends on this business, Russian business now, and really it's very interesting your opinion about the situation with the WikiLeaks. I remember. Well, for a conclusion, Martin, what do you think about this more information, the emails in the represent now with Ukraine, the war in Ukraine with Russia interesting, and the American political issues in this case?
Well, I mean, I think they're look. Actually, let me finish up by saying something. As I said in the start of my talk, I mean, they seem to be heading for negotiations, and it looks like both sides have to agree to something. I think Russia is going to ask for eastern Ukraine. They're going to ask for Ukraine to guarantee its neutrality, which Zelensky has already agreed to do. I don't know to what extent Zelensky is going to go ahead with the territorial concessions, but I guess he's going to have to concede something. And also, I think he's going to be talking about denazification, which is a way of saying that you've got to move to maybe purge the government of certain people the Russians don't like. I don't know how far they can do that. But at least Russia has, I think, given up any pretense that they could take over all of Ukraine. They're just going to go and install a government in Kiev, and they're going to have a satellite there. No, I think Putin realizes he can't do that, which is I think a big mistake. But to cap all this, I'd like to something that I think jumped up. I think what we had again, a sort of a post-mortem on this war, if it's perhaps too early for that, at least an analysis, looking back on what has happened, what went right and what went wrong. We see again a total failure of intelligence, of the intelligence service. This was on both sides. As much as Putin's side, where the FSB told him that and gave him the idea that he could actually walk into Ukraine and take Kiev in 3 days, right? According to Putin, this is what his intelligence chiefs told him, and that's why he's now fired them. He's arrested them. And also on the part of the United States. where although they had the technical intelligence, right? They had made a very close satellite following of the Russian military buildup around Ukraine. They had pretty much judged they had pretty much analyzed very well the intentions to invade. That was what they were working on. That was their objective. Nonetheless, again, it's funny, they made the same mistake. They said that that the Russians were going to take General Milley, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that they were going to take Ukraine in 3 days. That they were going to take Kiev in 3 days. So again, the analysis failed. And it's funny, I wonder, perhaps the United States got their information, got their analysis from the FSB, possibly ignoring their own people on the ground who had a better idea of what the Ukrainian military were capable of, and the special forces trainers and so on. They probably would have told them, no, these guys have the capability to do this long time. And there was work with that. So again, we're looking at a high level failure of an analyzing and processing intelligence correctly. And this is one of the things that really stands out. And after Afghanistan, it's amazing. I mean, our intelligence services are really failing. And they're too politicized. Their assessments are generally based on tailored, on top intelligence bosses talking to each other, rather than actual field, actual reports, feedback from the ground. And usually the reports need to be tailored to the political criteria, the political needs of their respective national leaders. And this seems to stand out. They tell them what they want to hear, and seems to stand out again in Ukraine, the same as it did in Afghanistan. And I don't know. It kind of makes you wonder what maybe we should abolish intelligence services. They don't seem to be doing a very good job these days.
That's right. That really.
They just seem to be getting everybody into trouble. They got Biden in trouble in Afghanistan, making believe that the Afghan government could hang on there for months when it collapsed in days. They got Putin into trouble in Ukraine by telling him he could take over. He could march into Kyiv in days, and it's taking him months.
Really?
So yeah, maybe they could just abolish.
It's true.
They don't seem to be doing anybody any good.
It's true. I know. Okay.
Okay, Christian.
Thank you so much, Arostegui. Very important report. In this case, Ukraine, all interested in the war. Thank you so much, Martin. We continue the next podcast next Saturday. And thank you for subscribe and share this video and sharing the YouTube channel of International Law, Security, Anti-Corruption, and Business. Thank you, and see you.
Thank you, Christian. Talk to you next week. Sure.
See you, Martin Arostegui.